In this video, we're taking a look at this, the Fifine Tank 2 XLR USB microphone, and for just over $50, being an XLR and USB microphone with direct monitoring, a mute button, and all of that, is this something that you should consider picking up? I haven't listened to it yet. We don't know what the quality is necessarily, but if it's anything like the other budget microphones from Fifine, I'm sure it sounds just as good as those. So let's get it unboxed. Let's do some sound samples against some other microphones and talk about whether you should pick up the Tank 2. So here it is, the Fifine Tank 2, and I want to talk about the aesthetic of this microphone before we even pull it out of the box. This is a very common form factor that you would see from something like the Shure SM58 or even some other microphones on the market that you probably see for stage appearance and stuff like that. Inside the box, you'll actually see the user guide, which I'm sure is full of a whole bunch of things on how to use a microphone. If you've never used one, they're pretty simple. It's just plug and play. And then there's also direct monitoring if you're using USB, etc. But it looks like this actually comes with a stand. We'll go ahead and actually do this before we get into the actual microphone, because I'm really excited the fact that they did include a stand, and it's not just a normal, one stick stand plugging on the top, but this is actually meant for desk use because it does have a point where you can loosen it and it does extend. So this is actually pretty cool that these manufacturers are including stands in this, especially with adapters, because this, not only if you continue to use this microphone, you still can always continue to use the stand. It's nice, good weight, everything like that. We also get a USB cable in the box. It is USB-C on one end, and then thankfully, I'm so glad that people are doing this. They're including a USB-C to USB-A attached adapter because some people, might be using a MacBook or something that would just be USB-C to C, or even plugging into their PlayStation, which is, I think, just USB-C on the front and then USB-A on the back. So really nice that I'm seeing them continue to include a C to A adapter. Now, here is the microphone itself, the Fifine Tank 2, and on the top, they've included this wind muff, which is pretty nice, good foam quality, but it's just what you would normally see from any kind of a wind screen or anything like that. Pretty typical cushion, whatever the case. But here's the actual Fifine Tank 2 itself. You can see that it does have the toggle mute button here. I'm assuming this is probably going to be green to red. Hopefully, we'll see when we actually get it plugged in. On the bottom of the microphone, we do have that XLR port here, and we also have the USB port with a volume up and down rocker here with it feels like a push in button, probably to go between mic volume as well as your headset volume. We'll see more about that here in just a moment. Actually, let's look in the guide. Reading through this, the actual switch on the back that controls this right here only controls the output volume for what goes to the headphones. It's actually not the monitor volume. So it just controls the audio volume from the computer. So that's going to be one of those things you need to understand there. One thing I'm curious about, which they didn't really show, is that they said that there's an on and off switch. Obviously, the light's not going to connect when it's just an XLR because there's no power being to the microphone, but I'm curious if the on-off toggle will work in XLR mode. That'd be pretty cool to actually have an a physical mute button on the actual device, even in XLR mode. Some microphones do this. That'd be pretty cool to see it on this as well. And again, for $54, obviously we're getting an included mic adapter to be able to attach it, whatever the case. So yeah, let's go ahead and get it plugged in. We're going to do XLR test, then we'll plug in the USB, and we'll do some sound test and put it against the other microphones. And we'll come back for my final thoughts after we do that. And this is the Fifine Tank 2. We're on XLR sound right now. We're plugged directly in. And just to confirm, that dip switch does actually control the mute for XLR, which is pretty cool that the mute will actually work. And then also let's talk about decibels. This is on 47 decibels of gain through my Wave XLR. It's at 100% volume inside Windows. And just also for reference, my Shure SM7B only runs at about 57 decibels, so about 10 decibels lighter than that to achieve this sound, which is pretty normal. I'm watching the dB meter over in OBS, and it's a pretty typical range, probably comparable to what you're seeing. Now, I haven't listened to it yet. I'm sure I'll listen to it here in just a moment and give you my thoughts. But now that you're hearing it and you're first just getting the kind of exposure to this microphone, jump down to the comments. Tell me, what do you think about this microphone, at least on XLR? What do you think about it? It actually feels really nice. It's metal construction. Build quality is really nice. And I chose not to put the wind muff on top of this. Sure, I could do that. But I'm It's actually like 4:17 in the morning and I can't sleep and we're recording this video. So yeah, it's pretty quiet in my house and the air conditioner's off. My room's pretty like quiet tonight. Now again, this is just on XLR, but I'm gonna go ahead and record the XLR sound test, then plug in USB, and we'll do the rest of the video in USB. We'll talk about it there. As usual, I read the Sun Tzu Art of War, so here we go. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." All right, that's XLR. I'm going to plug in USB, do the USB sound test, and then we'll also put some other comparisons of other microphones around this price range of $50, so that you can have some things there. And you've already heard the Shure SM7B. I'm not going to show that sound test again, but there's been plenty of that already in this video. Anyway, let's get into this. So I just plugged in USB, and I want to show you a couple things that I just found, and to go ahead and confirm, yes, you can actually record both on XLR and on USB at the exact same time. They're both working, which is really cool. So we're inside Windows, and we're testing this on Windows. But I want to mention, so we're inside Windows and we're testing this in Windows, and I want to mention something that I just found when I was adjusting the audio gain of this. By the way, this is at 100% volume inside of Windows, and it almost matches the same decibels that I had for the XLR connection, so it looks pretty good. Just as an understanding, it started out at 81 in Windows when I first plugged it in, so you might have to adjust it up and down to match it to wherever you want, but this seems pretty close to what I normally want my microphones to sit at, kind of peaking up to around -6 or so, but hovering around an average of -12. Anyway, inside of Windows, we actually see that it defaulted to 24-bit recording, and if you know anything about audio, the more bit that we have, the less kind of compression and range that you have. It's kind of hard to try to explain this in layman's terms, but if you know audio, you already understand what it is, but what you do need to know is the higher that bit is, going from 16 to 24 to 32, like 32 bit has like, you don't peak. The higher that bit you can get, the better like range you have of dynamic range on that microphone before you start getting clipping. And I think that's the best way I can try to explain it anyway. Out of the box, it defaulted to 2-channel 24-bit 48,000 hertz, but it can go up to 192,000 hertz, which is pretty nice that you're going to be able to get out of a $50 microphone. Even some of their other microphones like the AM8 and the K688, I don't believe have 24-bit on them. So to be a cheaper microphone with both XLR and USB with a stand and be able to get 24-bit 192,000 hertz or 192,000 hertz, yeah, that's actually pretty insane. But we're going to leave it at 48,000 because that's what my OBS is at, so that everything matches and works nicely. So here's the USB sound test. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." All right, so let's go ahead and bump this against some other microphones around a similar price range right here. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, Earth, the commander, method, and discipline. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors, to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline." TLDR, should you buy this microphone? If you're in the market for a microphone that is handheld, looks like SM58, USB XLR, $50 is a great price. And other microphones on the market, like the Samsung Q2U, which is about $100 microphone that other people have sworn by, I think this is a great alternative to that for half the price, and probably I think there's more accessories at least for you in this box. As far as sound quality goes, I think it matches all of the other dynamic microphones that Fifine does, the K688, the new Tank 6, the one that we just recently reviewed. These microphones are great that they're putting out, and it's kind of hard to compare other budget microphones to a company that's continued to put out great microphones at a budget price. And I think they just released a new version of the AM8. Hopefully we get our hands on that and we can review it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Check out one of these 2 videos, especially my favorite microphone from them, the K688, which comes in 3 different colors. They've got like a 2025 refresh on it. Anyway, hope to see you in one of those videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.